The Day I Stood with Humans and Witnessed Real Terror, Part 1. Rockwell had served the Galactic Council for 47 cycles. He had walked on planets made of glass. He had breathed air that burned his throat on the frozen moons of the Outer Rim. He had watched stars die and new ones take their place. He had studied over 100 species across the known galaxy. He thought he had seen everything there was to see. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. The Council had given him a new assignment. They called it a diplomatic observation mission. He was to board a human starship, live among the crew, study their behavior, and send reports back to the Council. It sounded simple. Many officers before him had done similar work with other species. But when the Council members handed him the mission file, Rockwell noticed something strange. None of them would look him in the eye. The elder who approved the mission placed a hand on his shoulder and said only 2 words: "Be careful." Rockwell did not understand the warning. Humans were a young species. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel less than 200 years ago. Their bodies were soft. Their bones broke easily. They could not breathe underwater. They could not survive in a vacuum. They had no claws, no venom, no natural armor. By every measure the Council used to rank species, humans were average at best and fragile at worst. So Rockwell boarded the ship called the Bright Horizon without fear. He carried his data pad, his observation tools, and a small bag of personal belongings. A crew member met him at the docking bay. She was shorter than him by at least a full head. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes were sharp and calm. She wore a gray uniform with a name stitched across the chest. "Yuna. You must be the Council observer," she said. It was not a nervous smile, or a polite one. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they find something amusing. "Welcome aboard. Try not to trip on the way in. The floors get slippery near the engine room." Rockwell blinked. He had expected a formal greeting, a salute perhaps, or at the very least, a stiff handshake. Instead, this human woman made a joke about slippery floors. He did not know what to say, so he simply followed her. The ship was not what he expected either. Council ships were clean and quiet. Everything was in its place. Every surface was smooth and white. The Bright Horizon was different. The walls were covered in scratches and dents. There were marks and stains that told stories Rockwell could not yet read. Somewhere deep inside the ship, loud music was playing. He could hear laughter echoing through the metal corridors. It smelled like food and engine oil and something sweet he could not name. The door slid open, and Rockwell stepped inside. A man stood at the center console. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His jaw was square, his eyes dark and steady. He wore the same gray uniform as Yuna, but his had a stripe of gold across the shoulders. He turned when Rockwell entered and gave a small nod. "Captain Do-hyun," Yuna said. "Our guest is here." Do-hyun looked at Rockwell for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Rockwell knew this gesture. It was a human greeting. He reached out and took the hand. Do-hyun's grip was firm, not painful, but strong, the kind of strength that did not need to prove itself. "Welcome to my ship," Do-hyun said. His voice was low and even. "You are free to go wherever you want. Watch whatever you want. Ask whatever you want. We have nothing to hide." Rockwell thanked him and took a seat in the corner of the bridge. He opened his datapad and began to take notes. Over the next few hours, he watched the crew work. They moved around each other like water flowing through rocks. There was no shouting, no confusion. They communicated with short words, small gestures, and sometimes just a look. Yuna would glance at the navigation officer, a quiet young man named Hajin, and he would adjust the ship's course without a single word being spoken. It was efficient. Rockwell had to admit that, but it was also strange. Council crews operated on strict rules and chains of command. Every order was spoken clearly and repeated back. Every action was logged and approved. The humans did none of that. They moved on instinct and trust. It made Rockwell uncomfortable. That evening, Rockwell joined the crew in the mess hall for dinner. The room was loud and warm. People sat in groups, eating and talking and laughing. A large man with thick arms and a wide grin sat across from Rockwell. He was the ship's sergeant, in charge of the ground combat team. "So," Tejo said, chewing a piece of bread, "you are here to write about us?" "To observe," Rockwell corrected. Tejo laughed. It was a big booming sound that filled the room. "Same thing. You watch, you write, you tell the council that humans are weird. That is what the last observer said." Rockwell tilted his head. "There was another observer before me?" "3, Una said from the next table. She did not look up from her food. "The first one left after a week. Said we were too loud. The second one lasted a month, but could not handle the food. The third one stayed for 3 months. "What happened to the third one?" Rockwell asked. The table went quiet. Tejo stopped chewing. Una put down her fork. Even the noise in the rest of the room seemed to drop a little. Then Do-hyun spoke from the far end of the hall. Rockwell had not even noticed him sitting there. "He saw us fight," the captain said simply. The silence held for another moment. Then Tejo laughed again and slapped the table. He filed his report and never came back. Probably sitting on some safe moon somewhere, drinking expensive wine and trying to forget. The crew laughed. The noise returned. People went back to eating and joking. But Rockwell did not laugh. He looked at Do-hyun, and the captain looked back at him. There was no threat in those dark eyes. No warning. Just a quiet knowing. Like a man who understood exactly what he was, and felt no need to explain it. That night, Rockwell lay in his small cabin and stared at the ceiling. The ship hummed around him. He could hear footsteps in the corridor outside. Someone was singing softly. He thought about the 3 observers who came before him. He thought about the Elder's warning. Be careful. He picked up his datapad and typed his first entry. Day 1 aboard the human vessel Bright Horizon. The crew is informal, loud, and strangely comfortable with danger. They show no fear. I do not yet understand why the Council considers them a species of concern. But something is here. Something beneath the surface. I can feel it the way one feels a storm before it arrives. He put the pad down and closed his eyes. Sleep did not come easily. The Day I Stood with Humans and Witnessed Real Terror, Part 2. 3 weeks passed. Rockwell settled into the rhythm of the ship, the way a stone settles into a river. The current moved around him, and he learned to stop fighting it. He woke when the lights came on. He ate when the crew ate. He walked the corridors and watched, and listened, and wrote his reports. The humans were strange. That was the only word he could use. Not dangerous, not threatening, just deeply, endlessly strange. He watched Hajin, the ship's engineer, take apart the navigation console one afternoon because he said it felt slow. There was nothing wrong with it. Every test showed it was running perfectly, but Hajin said he could feel a delay of a few milliseconds when he entered commands. So he opened the panel, spread the parts across the floor, and rebuilt the entire thing from scratch, while humming a song Rockwell did not recognize. When he was done, the console ran exactly the same as before. Hajin smiled anyway and said it felt better now. Rockwell wrote in his notes, "Humans repair things that are not broken. They trust feeling over data. This is inefficient, but somehow produces results." He watched Una run combat drills on the training deck. She moved fast. Not the fastest species Rockwell had seen, but there was something about the way she moved that made his skin tighten. It was not grace. It was purpose. Every step, every strike, every turn was aimed at one thing, ending the fight as quickly as possible. She did not dance around her training partners. She walked through them. After one drill, she sat on the floor breathing hard, sweat running down her face. Rockwell approached her. "Your technique is impressive," he said. "Thanks," she said. She took a long drink of water. "My mother taught me. She was a Marine back on Earth." "Your mother was a soldier?" "My mother was a farmer who became a soldier when the border wars started. She went back to farming when it was over." Yuna wiped her face with a towel. "Humans are like that. We do what the moment needs." Rockwell thought about that for a long time. He also spent time with Jian, the ship's medic. She was small and quiet with gentle hands and a soft voice. Of all the crew, she seemed the most peaceful. She kept a small garden in the medical bay, real plants growing in real soil under artificial sunlight. She said they helped her think. "Do you ever get scared?" Rockwell asked her one morning while she watered a small green plant with tiny white flowers. Jian looked at him. Her eyes were warm and honest. "All the time," she said. That surprised him. "But you do not show it." Showing it and feeling it are two different things. She touched one of the white flowers gently. "Fear keeps us alive. It tells us to pay attention. But we choose what to do with it. That is the human way. We feel the fear. Then we do the thing anyway." Rockwell added this to his notes. He underlined it twice. On the 22nd day, everything changed. It started with a sound. A sharp electronic beep that cut through the hum of the ship like a knife. Rockwell was in the mess hall, eating a simple meal, when the lights above flickered and turned red. A voice came over the ship's speakers. It was calm, but urgent. "All crew to stations. Distress signal received. Repeat, distress signal received." The mess hall emptied in seconds. Rockwell had never seen anything move that fast. People dropped their food, pushed back their chairs, and ran. Not in panic, in purpose. Every person knew exactly where to go and what to do. Rockwell followed the flow of bodies to the bridge. Do-hyun was already there. He stood at the center console, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. The main screen showed a map of the nearby system. A small red dot blinked on a planet labeled Verath 9. "What is it?" Rockwell asked from his corner. "Mining colony," Do-hyun said without looking at him. 62 people, mostly workers and their families. "They sent a distress signal 4 minutes ago." He paused. It cut off mid-sentence. The bridge went quiet. Rockwell understood what that meant. A signal that cuts off suddenly means one of two things. Either the equipment failed, or the people sending the signal could no longer send it. Hajin pulled up more data on his screen. "The colony's defense grid is offline. No power signatures from the main complex. But I am picking up movement on the surface. A lot of movement." "What kind of movement?" Yuna asked. Hajin looked at Do-hyun. Something passed between them. A look that carried weight. "Dread swarm," Hajin said quietly. The word hit the bridge like a punch. Rockwell felt his blood go cold. He knew what the dread swarm was. Every species in the galaxy knew. They were a hive species. Billions of creatures moving as one mind. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They consumed. Planet after planet, colony after colony. They ate everything. Metal, rock, flesh, bone, and moved on. The Council had classified them as a Class 7 extinction threat. There was no Class 8. Rockwell expected the crew to hesitate. He expected fear, debate, maybe even a vote. That was what his own species would do. They would weigh the risks, calculate the odds, decide if the mission was worth the cost. The humans did none of that. "Taeho," Do-hyun said. His voice did not change. It did not rise or fall. It was the same steady low tone he always used. "Get your team ready. Full combat gear. We drop in 30 minutes. Already moving." Taeho's voice came through the speaker. He was not even on the bridge. He had heard the distress signal, and started preparing before anyone gave the order. Jian, Do-hyun continued. Full medical kit. Expect heavy casualties. Packed and ready, Captain, Jian replied. Her voice was calm, gentle even, like she was talking about a walk in her garden. Yuna, you have the ground lead. Understood. That was it. No long speeches, no dramatic moments. No one asked about survival odds or exit strategies. Do-hyun gave orders. The crew followed. The whole exchange took less than a minute. Rockwell stood in his corner and watched. His hands were shaking. He held his data pad against his chest to stop the trembling. 62 people were trapped on a planet with a dread swarm, and these humans were going to fly straight into it. He moved closer to Do-hyun. Captain, he said. His voice was thin. The dread swarm has destroyed entire fleets. Your ship has one crew. How do you plan to fight them? Do-hyun looked at him. For the first time, Rockwell saw something in those dark eyes. Not fear, not courage. Something older, something deeper. We do not plan to fight them, Do-hyun said. We plan to get those people out. And if you cannot? Do-hyun turned back to the screen. The red dot on Vareth 9 blinked steadily, like a heartbeat growing weaker. Then we die trying, the captain said, and we make it cost them. Rockwell opened his datapad. His fingers moved slowly. He typed one line. They are not brave. Bravery is a word for those who overcome fear. These humans do not overcome it. They carry it with them like a weapon. They hold it close and walk forward anyway. I am beginning to understand why the council is afraid. He saved the entry and followed the crew to the drop bay. The ship turned toward Vareth 9. The stars outside shifted, and somewhere below, 62 people waited in the dark, not knowing that the most terrifying species in the galaxy was coming to save them. The Day I Stood with Humans and Witnessed Real Terror, Part 3. The dropship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Vareth 9. The metal walls rattled and groaned. The lights flickered between white and red. Rockwell gripped the harness straps around his chest so hard his knuckles turned pale. He was not built for this. His species traveled in smooth, pressurized shuttles with gravity stabilizers and soft seats. This human dropship was a metal box falling through fire. Around him, the humans sat in 2 rows facing each other. They wore heavy combat armor, dark gray with scuff marks and old dents. Each of them carried weapons, pulse rifles, sidearms, blades strapped to legs and arms. Their helmets hung from hooks above their heads, swinging with the turbulence. No one looked afraid. Taeho sat directly across from Rockwell. The big man was checking his rifle with calm, practiced hands. He pulled the charging mechanism, checked the barrel, tested the sight, and slid the weapon back into its slot. Then he looked at Rockwell and grinned. First drop? Taeho asked. Rockwell nodded. He did not trust his voice. You will be fine, Taeho said. Stay behind us. Do not run unless we tell you to run. And if something with too many legs comes at you, get low and cover your head. That is not comforting, Rockwell said. Taeho laughed. It is not supposed to be. Yuna stood at the front of the dropship near the door. She held a data screen in one hand and a short blade in the other. She was reading the surface scans Hajin had sent from the main ship. Her face was still and focused. The jokes were gone. The easy smile was gone. What remained was something sharp and hard, like a blade pulled from its cover. Listen up, she said. Her voice cut through the noise of the ship with no effort. Every head turned to her. The colony is built into the rock face on the east side of the valley. Main entrance is a cargo door at ground level. Hajin is reading heavy swarm activity around the western perimeter. That means they are coming from the plains and pushing toward the colony. She tapped the screen. A rough map appeared. We land here, 200 meters south of the main entrance. We move fast. We get inside. We find survivors. Jaehyun handles the wounded. Taeho, your squad holds the entrance. I will lead the search team inside. What about the swarm? One of the soldiers asked, a young man with nervous eyes. We avoid them if we can, Yuna said. We fight them if we cannot. She paused and looked at the young soldier. Stay with your team. Follow orders. You will be fine. The young man nodded. Rockville noticed his hands were shaking, but he held his weapon steady. Fear and action, living side by side, the human way. The dropship hit the ground hard. The door slammed open, and hot, dry air rushed in. Rockville blinked against the light. Varath 9 was a rocky, dusty world. Red stones stretched in every direction under a pale orange sky. The colony was visible ahead, a series of metal structures built into a massive cliff face. Smoke rose from several points. The cargo door was half open, bent and twisted like something had torn through it. And the sound. Rockville would never forget the sound. It was a low hum that came from everywhere at once. Not loud, but deep. It vibrated in his bones and made his teeth ache. It was the sound of millions of creatures moving together, breathing together, thinking together. The dread swarm. Move, Yuna said. One word. That was all it took. The humans moved. They poured out of the dropship in a tight formation. Boots hit dirt. Weapons came up. Eyes scanned every direction. Tahoe took the left flank. Jian stayed in the center with her medical pack, her small frame almost hidden between the armored soldiers around her. Rockville ran with them. His legs were longer than theirs, but he struggled to keep up. It was not speed that separated him from the humans. It was certainty. They ran like they knew exactly where every foot would land. He ran like a creature being chased. They reached the cargo door in under 2 minutes. Up close, the damage was worse. Deep claw marks covered the metal. The walls were stained with something dark that Rockville did not want to identify. The lights inside were dead. Only emergency strips along the floor gave off a faint red glow. Tahoe positioned his squad at the entrance. 6 soldiers spread out in a half circle, weapons pointed outward toward the open plain. The hum was louder now. Rockville could see movement on the horizon. Dark shapes, thousands of them, flowing across the red stone like a living river. They are coming, Tahoe said. He did not sound worried. He sounded like a man stating the weather. Hold this door, Yuna said. Nothing gets in. Tahoe nodded once. Nothing will. Yuna led the search team inside. Rockville followed. The corridors were dark and damaged. Ceiling panels hung loose. Wires sparked. The floor was covered in debris. Broken tools, scattered personal items, torn clothing. Signs of a life interrupted violently and without warning. They moved room by room. Yuna checked each one with quick, precise movements. She would enter, sweep her weapon light across the space, call out, and move on. The team followed her rhythm without hesitation. In the 4th room, they found the first survivors. A group of 11 people huddled behind a barricade of overturned tables and storage crates. They were miners and their families. Men and women with dust-covered faces and wide, terrified eyes. 2 children clung to a woman in the back, their small faces buried in her shirt. Jian moved immediately. She knelt beside a man who was bleeding from a deep wound on his leg. Her hands worked fast, pulling bandages and medical tools from her pack. She spoke to him in a soft voice while she worked. You are safe now, she said. We are here. The man stared at her. He was shaking. They came from the tunnels, he whispered. They came through the walls. We could not stop them. How many more people are in the colony? Yuna asked. I do not know, the man said. We sealed this room when the swarm broke through. There were others deeper inside, in the lower levels. Yuna looked at her team. No one needed to be told. They were going deeper. She left 2 soldiers to guard the survivors and moved on. The corridors grew narrower as they went lower. The hum grew louder, and then they saw the first signs of the swarm's presence. The walls were covered in a dark, sticky substance. It glistened in the light of their weapons. It pulsed slightly, like it was alive. The dread swarm did not just kill. It transformed. It changed the environment to suit its needs, turning metal and stone into something organic, something that fed the hive. Rockwell's legs stopped moving. He stood in the corridor and stared at the walls and felt something ancient rise inside him. A fear that went beyond thought. A fear that lived in the body, in the blood, in the deepest part of the brain that remembered what it meant to be prey. Yuna noticed he had stopped. She came back to him. She did not yell. She did not grab him. She simply stood in front of him and looked into his eyes. "I know," she said quietly. "I see it too." "How do you keep going?" His voice was barely a whisper. Yuna looked down the dark corridor. The hum pulsed like a heartbeat. Something moved in the shadows ahead. She checked her weapon and turned back to him. "Because someone down there is waiting for help," she said, "and I would want someone to come for me." She walked forward into the dark. The team followed, and Rockwell, against every instinct screaming inside him, followed too. In his mind, he composed a single line for his report. He would write it later if he survived. "I have studied 100 species. I have seen courage in many forms. But I have never seen anything like this. Humans do not ignore fear. They walk beside it like an old companion. And in the darkest places, where every other species would turn and run, they light a fire and push forward. It is not madness. It is something far more dangerous." The lower levels of the colony smelled like rot and metal. The air was thick and wet, and every breath Rockwell took felt like swallowing something alive. The walls had changed completely down here. No more steel, no more concrete. Everything was covered in the dark, pulsing substance of the hive. It clung to the floor, the ceiling, the doors. It grew over light panels and air vents, turning the colony into something that no longer belonged to the people who built it. Yuna moved through it without slowing down. Her weapon light cut through the darkness ahead. Behind her, the team followed in a tight line. Their breathing was controlled. Their steps were careful, but steady. Rockwell could hear their heartbeats through his observation device. They were elevated. Every single one of them was afraid. But not one of them stopped. They found the second group of survivors in a sealed storage room deep underground. 23 people, including 7 children. They had locked themselves in when the swarm broke through the lower tunnels. A woman named Mireille had taken charge of the group. She was not a soldier or a leader. She was a geologist who studied rocks for a living. But when the swarm came, she was the one who sealed the door. She was the one who kept the children calm. She was the one who rationed the water and told everyone they would be okay, even when she did not believe it herself. When the door opened and Yuna stepped inside, Mireille looked at her with eyes that held 2 weeks of terror and exhaustion. She did not cry. She did not collapse. She simply said, "There are more people on the east side, level 4. I heard them on the radio before it went dead." Yuna nodded. "We will get them. Jian, take care of these people." She knelt beside a child with a bandaged arm. The bandage was old and dirty, made from torn clothing. Jian removed it gently, cleaned the wound, and wrapped it with proper medical supplies. The child watched her with wide, quiet eyes. "Does it hurt?" Jian asked. The child shook his head. He was lying. Jian knew it. She smiled at him anyway and placed a small sticker on his shirt. It was a tiny star. She carried a sheet of them in her medical pack. Rockwell did not understand why a combat medic would carry stickers into a war zone. Later, he would realize it was the most human thing he had ever seen. Yuna split the team. She took 3 soldiers and headed for level 4. She told Rockville to stay with the survivors. He refused. "I am here to observe," he said. His voice was steadier now. Not because the fear was gone. It was not. It was because the fear had become so large that it had broken through the other side into something cold and clear. He was terrified, and in that terror, he found a strange kind of focus. Yuna studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. "Stay close. Do exactly what I say." They moved deeper. Level 4 was worse. The hive growth was thicker. It pulsed with a rhythm that matched the hum, which was now so loud it was almost a physical force. The lights were completely gone. Only their weapon lights remained, cutting thin white lines through the absolute dark. And then the swarm found them. It came from the walls, not through doors or corridors, but from inside the walls themselves. The hive material split open like skin, and creatures poured out. They were the size of large dogs, with hard black shells, and too many legs. Their mouths were wide and filled with rows of flat grinding teeth, designed not for biting, but for consuming. Their eyes were blank white, reflecting the weapon lights like small moons. The first wave hit the rear of the team. A soldier screamed and went down. Yuna spun and fired. The pulse round tore through the lead creature, and it fell. But 2 more took its place. The corridor filled with the sound of gunfire, screeching, and breaking shell. Rockville pressed himself against the wall. His body locked. Every cell in him screamed to run, to flee, to get as far from this place as possible. He was not a fighter. He was an observer. He carried a datapad, not a weapon. He had no place here. But he could not look away. He watched Yuna fight. She moved with a speed and violence that took his breath away. She fired her rifle with one hand and swung her blade with the other. A creature leapt at her face. She ducked under it, drove the blade up into its belly, and threw it aside in one motion. Another one came from the left. She shot it without turning, as if she had eyes in the back of her head. A creature lunged from a crack in the ceiling and drove its claw through her left shoulder. The blade went deep. Blood sprayed across the wall. Yuna made a sound, not a scream, but a sharp grunt, like someone lifting something heavy. She grabbed the creature's leg with her wounded arm, pulled it off her shoulder, and slammed it into the floor. Then she shot it point blank. She kept fighting. Blood ran down her arm and dripped from her fingers. She did not stop. She did not slow down. She shifted her rifle to her other hand and kept firing. Rockville's datapad slipped from his numb fingers. On the surface, things were no better. Tejo and his squad held the cargo door as the swarm came across the plains. Thousands of creatures moved toward the colony in a dark, chittering wave. Tejo had set up a defensive line with portable barriers and mounted weapons. They fired in controlled bursts, cutting down the front line of the swarm again and again. But for every creature that fell, 10 more came behind it. "They are pushing harder on the right side," one of the soldiers called out. "Then push back harder," Tejo said. A creature broke through the barrier on the far left. It charged straight at the line. Tejo dropped his rifle, stepped forward, and met it with his bare hands. He grabbed the thing by its shell, lifted it off the ground, and threw it back into the swarm. It crashed into 3 others, and they all went down in a pile of legs and broken shells. Another soldier stared at him. "Did you just throw it?" "It was in my way," Tejo said. He picked up his rifle and kept firing. But the line was thinning. Ammunition was running low. 2 soldiers were wounded. One had a deep cut across his face that bled into his eyes. He wiped the blood away with his sleeve and kept shooting. Inside the colony, Yuna reached level 4. They found the last group of survivors, 18 people barricaded in the engineering room. The door was dented from the outside. Claw marks covered every inch of it. The people inside had been listening to the swarm trying to break through for days. When Yuna opened the door, a man fell to his knees and wept. An older woman grabbed Yuna's hand and held it like it was the only real thing left in the world. "We need to move," Yuna said. Her face was pale from blood loss. Her left arm hung at her side, soaked red from shoulder to wrist. But her voice was steady. Her eyes were clear. "Everyone who can walk, walk. Everyone who cannot, we carry. No one stays behind." Rockvell helped. He did not think about it. He did not make a decision. His body simply moved. He lifted a child onto his back. He supported an injured woman with his arm. He walked with the humans through the dark, pulsing corridors of the hive, past the bodies of dead creatures and the marks of battle. Hajin's voice crackled over the radio from the ship above. "Captain, the swarm is converging. You have maybe 15 minutes before they overrun the position." Do-hyun's voice came back, calm as a still lake. "Then we leave in 10. Hajin, bring the ship down to the south clearing. Hot extraction. Keep the engines running." "Already on my way, Captain." Rockvell carried the child up through the levels. The boy was light and warm against his back. He held on tight with small hands. He did not cry. He had learned not to cry in this place. As they climbed, Rockvell passed June in the corridor. She was stitching a wound on her own forearm with one hand, while guiding a group of survivors with the other. There was blood on her clothes, and dirt on her face, and a sticker sheet sticking out of her pocket. She looked at Rockvell, and gave him a tired smile. "Almost there," she said. And somehow, against all reason, he believed her. The day I stood with humans and witnessed real terror. Part 5. The south clearing was a flat stretch of red stone, 200 meters from the colony entrance. It was open ground, no cover, no walls, nothing between the humans and the swarm except dust and air and the stubborn will to keep moving. Rockvell carried the child on his back as they ran. The boy's fingers dug into his shoulders. Around him, humans moved in a tight group, soldiers on the outside, survivors in the middle. Wounded leaned on the strong. The strong carried the weak. No one ran ahead. No one was left behind. Behind them, the swarm poured from the colony entrance, like dark water from a broken dam. They spilled across the rock in every direction, claws scraping, bodies clicking, that terrible hum growing louder with every second. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. The ground itself seemed to move. Taeho's squad held the rear. They walked backward, firing in steady, controlled bursts. Every few seconds, a creature would fall, but the gap between them and the swarm grew smaller with every step. Taeho was at the very back, the last body between the swarm and the people. His armor was cracked in 3 places. His rifle was running low on charge. A long scratch ran across his helmet, where a claw had nearly found his face. He did not retreat faster. He matched the pace of the slowest survivor. "Hajin, where are you?" Do-hyun's voice came through the radio. He was on the ground now, walking with the group. The captain had come down from the ship to help with the evacuation. He carried a wounded woman on his back, with one arm, and held a rifle in the other. 30 seconds, Captain," Hajin replied. His voice was tight with focus. "Coming in low from the east. I see you." Rockvell looked up. Against the pale orange sky, he saw the shape of the bright horizon dropping through the clouds. It was not a graceful descent. The ship came down fast and hard, engines screaming, dust exploding in every direction. It hit the clearing with a sound like thunder, and the loading ramp slammed open before the landing struts had even fully extended. "Go!" Do-hyun shouted. "Everyone inside, now!" The survivors ran. Some stumbled. Soldiers grabbed them and pulled them forward. Ji-yeon guided a group of children up the ramp, her small body moving between them like a shepherd among frightened lambs. The sticker sheet had fallen from her pocket somewhere in the colony. She did not notice. She counted heads as they passed. Every single one mattered. Rockville reached the ramp and set the child down. The boy looked up at him with dark, tired eyes. He did not say anything. He did not need to. He turned and ran inside the ship, where a crew member wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. The swarm reached the edge of the clearing. The first creatures came fast. Scouts, smaller and quicker than the rest. They leaped across the open ground with terrible speed. Tejo's squad opened fire. The mounted guns on the ship activated, sending heavy pulse rounds into the advancing horde. Dirt and shell fragments filled the air. "Everyone is in," Ji-yoon called from inside. "Tejo, pull back!" Yuna shouted. She stood at the top of the ramp, one arm hanging useless at her side, the other holding her rifle. Blood had soaked through the field bandage on her shoulder, and was dripping steadily onto the metal floor. She did not seem to notice. Tejo's squad turned and ran for the ship. One by one, they leaped onto the ramp. Tejo was last. He fired 3 final shots into the swarm, turned and ran. A creature lunged at his back. He spun mid-stride, caught it by the throat with one hand, and threw it sideways. Then he jumped onto the ramp as it began to close. The ship lifted. The engines roared. The ground fell away. Through the narrowing gap of the closing ramp, Rockville saw the swarm cover the clearing like a dark blanket. They climbed over each other, reaching for the ship, but it was already too high. The claws grasped at empty air. Then the ramp sealed shut, and there was silence. Not true silence. People were crying. Someone was coughing. Ji-yoon was giving orders to the other medics, her voice calm and clear. Machines beeped. The ship hummed. But after the chaos of the surface, it felt like silence. It felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. Rockville sat on the floor of the cargo bay. His legs would not hold him anymore. Around him, 61 survivors sat and lay in various states of shock and relief. The 62nd, a young man, had died in the colony before the humans arrived. Ji-yoon had found his body on level 3. She had closed his eyes and said his name before moving on. She did not have time to grieve. Not yet. But Rockville saw her face when she did it. She would carry that name for the rest of her life. The soldiers sat among the survivors. They removed their helmets. They shared water. Tejo sat against the wall, with his cracked armor still on, eating a ration bar with the same casual ease, as if he were sitting in the mess hall. A child sat next to him, staring at his massive arms. Tejo broke the ration bar in half, and offered a piece to the child. The child took it carefully, and chewed in silence. Yuna was on the floor nearby. Ji-yoon knelt beside her, working on her shoulder. The wound was deep and ugly. Ji-yoon cleaned it, applied a healing patch, and began stitching the edges together. Yuna watched her work with a distant expression. "You know," Yuna said, "I had plans tonight. I was going to read a book." "What book?" Ji-yoon asked without looking up. "I do not remember now. Something about a detective on Mars." "Sounds boring." "It is. That is why I like it." It was small and tired and real. Hajin came down from the bridge. He was still in his flight suit, his hair a mess, grease on his hands. He looked at the cargo bay full of survivors and soldiers, and the one alien observer, sitting on the floor with his datapad clutched to his chest. "Everyone okay?" he asked. "Define okay," Tejo said through a mouthful of ration bar. Hajin laughed. It was a short, breathless sound. The kind of laugh that comes not from humor, but from relief. From the simple, overwhelming fact of being alive. Do-hyun entered the bay. He had removed his armor. Underneath he wore a simple gray shirt stained with sweat and dust. He looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes of every person there. Survivors, soldiers, crew. He counted them the way Ji-yoon counted the children on the ramp. Every single one mattered. His eyes found Rockville. The captain walked over and sat down beside him on the floor. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The ship hummed around them. Stars moved outside the small windows. "You came with us," Do-hyun said. "I did," Rockwell replied. "You did not have to. I know." Do-hyun nodded slowly. He looked at his hands. They were large and scarred and steady. The hands of a man who had held both weapons and wounded, and never confused the two. "Will you put this in your report?" Do-hyun asked. Rockwell looked around the cargo bay. He looked at Taeho sharing food with a child, at Ji-eun stitching Yuna's wound while they talked about books, at Ha-jin checking on the survivors one by one, at the young soldier with the cut on his face, now sitting quietly with his eyes closed and a faint smile on his lips. At the 61 people who had been waiting in the dark, who had given up hope, and who were now wrapped in blankets and breathing free air because a ship full of strange, soft, breakable creatures had come for them. "Yes," Rockwell said, "I will put this in my report." He opened his datapad. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he began to write. "To the Galactic Council, this is my final report regarding the human species. I was sent to observe them, to study their behavior, to assess whether they are a threat or an ally. I have my answer. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the fastest. They are not the smartest. They do not have the longest lives or the sharpest senses. By every metric we use, they are ordinary. But I have walked with them into the dark. I have seen them bleed and keep fighting. I have seen them carry strangers on their backs. I have seen them stitch their own wounds and laugh about it. I have seen a medic give a sticker to a frightened child in the middle of a war zone. I have seen a captain say, 'No one stays behind,' and mean it with every cell in his body. Do not threaten them. Do not test them. Do not make them choose between peace and the people they love, because they will choose their people every single time, and they will burn the stars to keep them safe. I was sent to observe the humans. Instead, I witnessed something that my species has no word for. The closest translation I can offer is this: they are the ones who come when no one else will. That is the real terror. Not that they fight, but that they will never stop." Rockwell saved the report. He closed the datapad and leaned his head back against the wall. Around him, humans and survivors settled into an exhausted peace. Others joined, one by one, until the cargo bay was filled with a soft, wordless melody that floated through the ship like a promise. The bright horizon flew on through the stars, and Rockwell, for the first time in 47 cycles of service, felt something he had never expected to feel among aliens. He felt safe.